Welcome to the worldwide headquarters and studios of All Duke Sports Talk, where all Duquesne sports fans can unabashedly and fully indulge in everything Duquesne University sports. So, without further ado, let's get to it. And let's go Dukes.
Hello and welcome back to All Dukes Sports Talk. I'm your host, Bob Healy III. I'm joined once again by Rudy Longarini, as well as Nick Frost, and we are your home for all things Dukes sports. So you out there in Dukes Nation, you want to talk about men's hoops, women's hoops, football, the Olympic non-revenue sports, you name it. That's what we do here on All Dukes Sports Talk. This is episode number 3. This is the second one with me at the helm, as well as with Nick and Rudy joining us. We want to thank BB Flennery for also being a part of an episode in the past. We're going to have a few other guests coming on in the future as well, but this will probably be roughly the 2 to 3 guys you'll see every week. And this week we're going to lead off, as we usually do, with men's hoops. So guys, when we last talked, the men's basketball team we thought had hit rock bottom at 0-5. We didn't realize rock bottom was yet to come at 0-6. We had our last conversation in the middle of the Cayman Islands Classic. Duquesne had just come off of a loss, 71-60 against South Dakota State on November 24th. The next day, Duquesne lost to Hampton by a score of 64-59. And that's saying something. Hampton is not a good basketball program. Maybe turns out they will be this year, which would be beneficial to Duquesne in the long run. But kind of one of the lowest points we've had at Duquesne since bad season 2-3 years ago, before the program turned it around and, of course, went to March Madness last year. But lo and behold, on Tuesday, November 26th, the Dukes got their first win of the season, 67-54 against Old Dominion. So congratulations to Coach Drew Joyce on his first head coaching victory at the NCAA level. Division I wins don't come easy. Congratulations to Coach Joyce. There's been I'm sure, some stress and some heat Joyce has felt, from restless Dukes Nation that's expecting us to compete every year now. So congratulations to Coach Joyce, and also congratulations to Jake DeMichael, who was named to the all-tournament team at the Cayman Islands Classic. So the 6'4" sophomore from McKees Rocks, PA, he contributed 27 points over those 3 games. That's an average of 9. And he had 3 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, and a block shot. DeMichael, unless I'm mistaken, guys, did all of this while coming off the bench. I know we had some conversations with BB and then with Nick last week that DeMichael should be getting more playing time. So certainly, guys, starting with Nick, he hasn't done anything to hurt that argument.
No, I agree with the all-tournament team selection that he's been our most promising player throughout the course of this season so far. The other player that seemed to show a spark also off the bench during the tournament was Chabi, coming back and producing in our only win of the season so far. I thought that he was going to be a starter from what I heard in the offseason before his freshman year started, and then injuries and health kind of took a toll, as well as kind of Dixon stepping up. So it'll be interesting to see if he kind of reaches that potential that I'd heard about before his freshman season started.
Rudy?
Well, I watched the game. You guys cheapened out and didn't buy the package. But anyway, I saw the third game. Yes, Shabby looked good. He looked strong. Yeah, and I agree. But he got hurt last year. I think it was his knee at the beginning of the year, and really only got on towards the end of the season last year. So yeah, I'm encouraged, and I was happy to see DeMichael get that award or that recognition. I think that it was a solid game that they played, but like you said, it was tainted by losing to the first 2 people in the first place. So yeah.
Well, ironically, DeMichael's worst performance of the tournament came in the 67-54 win over Old Dominion. But one thing that I think of, and again, I'm just going off what I've heard. I did not get the Flow Sports subscription. Nick, I don't believe you did either. Rudy, you watched some of these games, but that the perimeter defense started to improve. The numbers that merit that out. Old Dominion was 2 for 17 from 3-point range. It makes you wonder, is there more contesting of these shots, or is it just a matter of luck sometimes in the early going of the season, like in the opener against Lipscomb, the ball just could not miss. Maybe the opponents are regressing to the mean in terms of 3-point percentage. Nick, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, without seeing the game, it's tough to give good analysis on how the defense played. I saw in some highlights that Kareem seemed to be pressing the guard well in the last game against Old Dominion. And from the offensive standpoint, Maximus Edwards had arguably his best game with us too. So it seemed like maybe it
Dinkins
was
had a good game too, didn't he? Dinkins?
yeah. So I
Yeah.
think it might have been kind of a good we hit rock bottom and then the players recovered well. I still think this week of preparing and kind of focusing on themselves is going to be where we see whether there's going to be real improvement or not. It could have just been that Old Dominion's not a good 3-point shooting team. I didn't really look into their numbers outside of the game either. So unfortunately, can't really bring too much analysis without actually seeing the game.
Well, we'll get a chance to see him again on Tuesday night at home against St. Peter's at the UPMC Cooper Fieldhouse. Another non-conference game, of course. That's a 7 p.m. tip-off. This is my call to the student section to do a much better game than they did at the last home game that I was at against Milwaukee. That was an 80-74 loss that should not have been. And I know this talk of the sixth man and the home court advantage can sometimes get overplayed and maybe oversold. But I was disappointed that there were so many students in attendance on a Tuesday night, meaning there's other things you can be doing, yet they made the conscious effort to come to the game. And yet for the bulk of the student body, they didn't get off their seats at any point during the game. So I was discouraged by that. You have a team that, I know they were 0-3 to that point in the season, but this is a team that, was the biggest story in sports in the whole country for about a week last year. And, an 0-3 start, and all of a sudden everyone's sitting on their hands all game. That game on November 19th, the loss to Milwaukee, could have looked a lot different if there just was more energy. You need that, I think. Basketball is one of those sports where the sixth man, I think, can really help invigorate and excite a team. Guys like Kareem Rozier screaming, doing that thing where he, looks like he's about to rip his shirt off and go nuts. That stuff's supposed to get you out of your seats. I didn't see one defense chant all game. The bench does it, but I was disappointed by that. So I think the students can do a much better job. Maybe coming back from Thanksgiving break, maybe they do that Tuesday night. What do you guys think?
So my question to you is, what was the giveaway for the students that drew them to attend but probably didn't participate?
There was a half court chance to make a bucket, make some money.
Yeah.
But if you're there and you're going to stick around for the whole game, they did stick around for the whole second half. They're there on purpose. It wasn't like someone paid them to be there. So it's strange to me that they didn't have a good time. Maybe they'll have a better time Tuesday. In their defense, even though that game was Duquesne lost the game by 6 points, they never really were a threat to win it. And that could be part of the reason. But I think as a student body, you have to help the team with some of that energy. That's part of the home court advantage you should be taking advantage of. Rudy, when you were a student at Duquesne, what were the student bodies like?
Oh man.
Games with arena mostly back then.
Shoo, rah, rah, had Mossy Murphy up there. So, dude, we could get up close and personal too with the basketball players. I remember to this day playing Pitt, okay, when Sam Clancy was there. And little me, coming underneath the bucket, when he was at the foul line. I remember coming in and cursing at him and trying to get him to miss the free throws. And here's this little guy underneath the court where I don't think they allow anymore. Where they walking. So I don't know. It wasn't like a student section. We didn't have a student section. It was just.
No, it was more of a neutral site game almost. It was off campus down at the Civic Arena, right? So there's a little bit more of an excuse to not have like a coalition of student body, right? I don't think there is no excuse right now. There's a dedicated student section. You get in for free. Go to the game. You're sitting behind the bucket that the other team's shooting on for one half. Like, get excited. I maybe I'm super biased on this because I watched a team with 3 wins under Danny Nee at one point when I was a student, and I would have killed for a team to be competitive like they are now. as a fan of sports at the school and something to do on like a random weeknight. It was strange to me that there wasn't more energy coming out of that. Nick, were you at that game?
At the Milwaukee game, no. I watched it on ESPN Plus, but no, I wasn't there. But I can say from my experience at the school, there's a collective of about, I'd say, 20 to 30 students that truly cared and participated at the games and went to all the games. And then there was a lot of other people that went for the giveaways or to go when it was a cool thing that they were trying to promote. And then they didn't necessarily participate constantly. And that was a constant focus, was trying to see what we could do to get students to care more. And winning definitely helps. I'll say that. But last year, it seemed like even during the runs, the students weren't there, but the alumni were still showing up more. And I think that might be what the school has to focus on until the students kind of just, I don't know. It seems like every time they have a chance to build interest with the students is when we start off the season slow and then they die off. Whenever the renovations were completed and the coop opened up, we started off, that was our worst season under the Dambrot era. And now we're bouncing back after our first NCAA tournament appearance, and we start off the season 0-6. Like it stinks that there is interest at the start of the season and then the losses kind of fizzle it out.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
the
you got to try,
Yeah.
got to win, right?
Yeah, winning solves everything. I do think if you have a team that's come March is competing again, for a bye, double bye, like there'll be students there. At that point, basketball fever might settle in. But opening up with going down so big against Lipscomb to start the season, a huge balloon just deflated and hasn't yet been inflated. And the team's performance since then, of course, has not yet inflated that balloon. So unfortunately, over winter break, which is most of December and January, right? That's when it's tough to get students in the building as well. So maybe at that point it'll be the alumni, maybe the families. One program that doesn't seem to have that much of a problem generating enthusiasm with its hardcore base is the women's basketball team, and you can count me
Yeah.
on those.
I just watched the game, right?
Yeah, Nick, you were at the game today. Why don't you talk to us about Duquesne St. Francis?
Yeah, so it was a much smaller attended game, being that the Steelers were playing at the same time. But St. Francis, I'd say, was kind of outmatched against us for the entirety of the game. The intro video got the players excited. I don't know if it was a new one or what, but I saw them reacting as if it was the first time they'd seen the video. It was great to see the shift changes in person, where Bert is regularly subbing out 4 people at a time. And even though they're playing 13 to 15, you can kind of see the core rotation starting to form of the key players that he's going to want to see in those clutch minutes. A lot of high scores today. Gabby Hutcherson had her career high as a Duke at 22. Megan McConnell doing her normal stuff, I think, had 17. Journey Kyaku could drive and get to the rim at will today. And there was a lot of great hustle plays by a few contributors I think are going to continue to perform. They're a well-rounded team. It's just going to be a matter of that same thing with the guys last year, of if they're able to lock in defensively and not turn the ball over, I truly believe they could beat anybody on their schedule, at least going into conference play. We talked about what the expectations should be. I looked into the conference to see how the rest of the teams were doing. I think top 3 isn't unreasonable. Now, it's still probably an optimistic viewpoint as a fan. And I'm sure if we do get Zach Weiss, who covers all the A10 on at some point, he'll probably talk me down to saying top 5. But we have a special team of leaders, and they play a fun game of basketball where they're pressing the entirety of the game. So it's constant action, constant searching for turnovers. The fans can build upon this, where when you're getting a bunch of stops and they start getting louder and louder, the defense is going to be a bigger impact again, and the away team's going to struggle because they're going to be physically tired too. So I do think that 6th man can really come in with how they're playing too, kind of the old VCU Havoc style under Shaka Smart. Kind of could be a possibility here at Duquesne with the women's team.
Well, Nick, you and I go to our share of women's games, and kudos to you for going there and missing the Steelers' nice performance on the road at Cincinnati. Steelers picking up a win with 400 plus yards from Russell Wilson, future Super Bowl MVP this year. I'm really high on Russell Wilson and the Steelers. But now let me digress to the women's basketball team again. Since we last spoke, they also had played Robert Morris in that county game, 77-61, Dukes over the Colonials. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Megan McConnell, a triple-double, which is very hard to do in college basketball. You see it even, I believe, and I could just be talking out of my rear end on this, but I believe it's less frequent in the women's game than it is the men's game. But 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists against Robert Morris for Duquesne to pick up that win. December 4th is the city game coming up for Duquesne at Pitt.
Right.
That's Wednesday at 6 p.m. So that's the next time the ladies play. Rudy, your thoughts on Megan McConnell and the women's team?
Well, I saw them play today, and McConnell's just awesome, man. What was it, a week ago? Dan Burt comes on in press conference and says the girl is the best basketball player in Pittsburgh, bar none.
Yeah,
Men's,
I agree with
women,
him.
huh?
I agree with him. Yeah, pound for
Right,
pound, genders aside. And she's the
right.
most exciting player to watch for me as well. Best leader. Yeah, Duquesne could do a lot worse than Megan McConnell and Kareem Rozier as sort of the leaders and energy of the teams for women's and men's respectively. I'm a huge Megan McConnell fan, not just because her family's from Brookline, which of course, makes them the best kind of people. But yeah, Megan McConnell is quite a leader, and just brings it every single game. It's, she's trending toward, first team all conference, possible all America team. So I'm excited.
All-American.
I think they're going to go where she takes them. One big question mark for me, guys, and I'm going to go to Nick on this, is having watched the game today, is how the team's been able to carry on offensively despite the loss of Tess Myers. Tess Myers was their 3-point threat. Have they filled that gap just by pure numbers? It looks to me like because of the rotation, they're just sort of getting it done by group.
Yeah, I was actually going to say that their freshman Nadia out of Washington, PA, seemed like she was filling in the role nicely. Early on in the season, Bert compared her to Dennis Rodman, but she's performed much better offensively than I think Rodman ever did. But she actually didn't play today. I saw one player off to the side with a cast on their wrist, so I don't know if that played a role in it or not. But she's been playing lights out, and I saw Tess is starting over at Wisconsin and putting up similar numbers to how she did here. So I was happy to see that she's doing well. I do think the guards with Journey and Megan kind of stepping up more has also helped give that room to improve, I guess, without Tess being there. And I think the guards that have replaced her might be a little more aggressive when it comes to stealing on the defensive side. So the fact that the defense might be picking things up and the pace might be there a little more might also help fill in for the lack of 3-point shooting threat that Tess definitely brought when she was here.
Well, Nadia Moore, let's hope that hand or wrist is okay. Nadia Moore went 4 for 5 from 3, 5 for 6 from the field against Robert Morris to get 14 points in just 13 minutes off the bench. So yeah, awesome stuff out of Nadia Moore. And you mentioned, Nick, the in-game presentation for the women's games. My daughters, my family, we love going to see that stuff as well. The external relations crew, that's Megan Jarling, Nick Apria, Leah Adams, Ryan Landry, Kimber Shentru, if I'm saying it correctly, Josh Brunette. These are the people in charge of like marketing, fan engagement, creative media. So kudos to those people. I do agree that they do a nice job with those pregame videos, creating a nice atmosphere. To me, going to the women's basketball games is the best bargain in town for entertainment for your family to go watch sports right now in Pittsburgh, especially with the way that team plays. And Megan's just a huge star. So yeah, big fan. Guys, let's go on to football. The Duquesne football team lost a heartbreaker. We talked about that last week at Central Connecticut State to lose what basically was the de facto NEC title game. The winner got the automatic qualifier to the national championship tournament, which is a pretty small field. So Duquesne losing that AQ, despite getting a co-conference title for the season, has their season end unceremoniously behind the 8 turnovers by Darius Prentice. Kind of a freaky game. I still believe Duquesne the better team. Central Connecticut State, though, did have a decent showing in the first round, losing by 1 score. So they represented the NEC nicely, which you like to see. Didn't get blown out or anything in the first round, but really would have loved to have seen Duquesne, which I think is one of the top 15 or 20 teams in the country for FCS, have a chance to make some noise in the playoffs. But it wasn't all bad news last week, as Duquesne received the second most all-conference honorees. Duquesne had 15 players tabbed all-conference, including the offensive rookie of the year. His name is Sean Solomon Jr. He's a sophomore running back. Solomon's the third NEC offensive rookie of the year in program history. Solomon had a pretty decent year stat-wise. You know, I mean, that's kind of a niche category. He didn't jump off the page necessarily, but he did have 263 yards rushing this year, a couple of scores. Caught 4 catches for 42 yards and another score. So 3 touchdowns out of the freshman. Kudos to him for the nice honor. Darius Prentice did lose out on Offensive Player of the Year, and I have to think that has a lot to do with the final performance of the season with those national record tying 7 interceptions. The running back for Central Connecticut State guys, of course, got the Offensive Player of the Year. So I think that final game of the season actually meant an awful lot. The Duquesne football team, of course, will look to regroup, have a spring semester to get their ducks in a row. I wanted to ask you guys if you looked into the roster at all, who you think might be the favorite coming out of spring or into next fall after the transfer portal closes to maybe be the quarterback. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I know Logan Kushner out of North Allegheny. I mean, North Allegheny is always a good local program. So,
Sure.
And they seem to like having a guy start for more than just 1 year as a filler, and he'd be coming in as I'd assume a redshirt freshman, since he didn't play those 4 games this year. So that I think they're gonna lean younger, but I mean, there's a lot of players on the depth chart, and I don't attend these practices, so I don't really know how everybody was stacked up as the season went on. Like if Prentice did get pulled, although that was never a question this year, even in that 7 interception game, they weren't pulling him.
Right.
I don't know. I just am speaking solely based off of high school sports knowledge more so than the actual roster. Do you have any insight, Bob, into how?
Yeah, so for the audience to understand, I am the one of the statisticians for Duquesne football, their home games. I'm kind of like the crew chief for stats for Duquesne football. I also do this for the NFL when they play games in Pittsburgh. I keep official stats. So when I watch pretty closely, and I follow the Dukes football probably closer than anyone. And Jordan Heisey was the guy, first guy off the bench this year for Duquesne. Right. He's played the last 3 years a little bit. This year he went, he had 10 attempts for 30 yards and no scores. He kind of I'm sorry, it's rushing. I'm just looking at his numbers here. He was 22 for 31, 1 pick, 3 scores. So he was efficient when he was in there. But I think Heisey's eligibility has expired because he has played in 22, 23, 24. He transferred in after having played somewhere else in 21. So in Division I sports, you get 5 years to do 4 seasons. But if you play 4 seasons in 4 years, you're done. It only pauses for military or for religious reasons. You can get a medical red shirt, but looking at his bio on the Duquesne website, it doesn't seem like Heisey is going to be around next year. So he might not be an option. So I like the way Nick was going with bringing in a guy to start for several years from a good high school program. I also know with the transfer portal the way it is, Duquesne is a nice landing spot for someone who's maybe a disgruntled FBS backup, who's not getting playing time that they think that they need to get stuff on tape. And Duquesne's a great opportunity to get a lot of passes on tape if you want to play at the next level or just to simply get playing time. So Duquesne's an attractive program, always in the running for its conference championship, is making somewhat of a habit for competing for, getting to the national tournament. They might finish the season nationally ranked. They're ranked 25th right now at the end of the regular season after that tough loss at CCSU. So it's not like Duquesne can't sell itself. You get to play you get to go up to play an FBS school 2 or 3 times a year now, the way Duquesne is taking these bye games. So they're an attractive landing spot. So I think the starting quarterback to me is not on the roster right now, but that'll be, a lot of that'll come out in spring ball and maybe in the fall camp. Rudy, any thoughts at all on football program before we move on?
Well, like I said, I was really high on Primantis, and he was great. I thought he threw a great ball, a lot like our starting quarterback for the Steelers. What's his name? He
Russell
throws.
Wilson.
Russ.
Yeah, he throws a kind of moonish ball. You
Yeah,
know,
the moonball. That's
and
right.
the same way. And I thought, but anyway, like you said, he sort of flubbed it a little bit. Well, a lot. When you throw 7 interceptions, I could have done that. I could throw 7 interceptions.
Might have thrown
So,
10 though. Maybe.
But
I did
anyway,
want to add before we move on. One of the other attractive things is we have two great running back options that are there to kind of ease whatever new quarterback is in his role and responsibility. Clemens came on, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure Butts was the presumed starter coming into the season, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's correct. He's a redshirt junior, so he should be back, but transfer portal being what it is, we'll
Right.
see. Mhm. And then Clements, Jamario Clements, he's a redshirt junior as well. So, you're going to have a lot of experience at running back. That does help. The Dukes are going to lose a lot at receiver, and I'm just looking through the roster because I lose track these days with the portal being what it is and guys coming in and out, what years people are. But I do know Joey Isabella was a graduate student, and he's going to move on. Isabella finished with a touchdown, and gosh, I want to say like the last, 10, 11 games of his career or something. Isabella had a great season. I want to quickly give a shout out to, I know Isabella's first team all conference, as was Parentis, but a couple of the other guys who at least made first team all conference, I want to mention by name. So Parentis at quarterback, Clements also was first team all conference, Isabella. We didn't mention Brian Badach Jr., an offensive lineman who was first team all conference. A D lineman, AJ Ackerman, was a grad student. He'll be gone. Badach is a junior, so he presumably could come back. Jack Dunkley, or Sack Dunkley, as they like to call him. The guy was an edge rusher. He's a kind of a modern day come off the edge and get sacks, kind of like specialty guy. But he certainly has had lots of other good plays this year, but he's known for forcing fumbles, getting tackles for a loss. Dunkley's only a sophomore, so presumably Dunkley would be back. Two other first teamers, a junior linebacker, Ty Howard, and a redshirt junior defensive back, Antonio Epps, or Tony Epps. So they do get a lot of talent back. There's, of course, a number of second-team guys as well who have a chance to come back and play. But they lose John Irby, who was another great receiver. He's a grad student. And I mentioned, of course, the other grad wide receiver, Isabella. So they have some holes to fill at receiver, and I don't know how well the depth looks in terms of what's going to be back next year. But let's not forget, this transfer portal was a double-edged sword, meaning like, yeah, you're going to lose maybe a few guys, but you also might get guys in, so maybe if you say, hey, we got a transfer coming from Utah State, Boise State, whatever it is, some FBS program, Florida State, you name it, that might help you get some other wide receivers to come in and want to play with that kid. A lot of times what I'm seeing happening across the country is you'll see guys transfer after a couple years from whatever school they're at, and they played together in high school, and they went to different schools, and then their junior, senior year, they transferred together to a college, and they could just resume that chemistry they had as a high school duo. So then maybe that's in the future for Duquesne. It's a strange world in college athletics with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember the transition from receiver being kind of easier to predict based off of the past seasons. Like I think Chris King kind of came on.
Yeah, I remember Chris.
And he kind of came on at the same started to come on at the same time that the number one receiver, whose name is just being blanked by me here, but it was his senior year.
He Nahari Crawford.
I think so.
Okay.
I think it was Amani. No, I can't remember the wide receiver that I'm thinking of. Tried to make
is it Amani? Is it Amani Moore? Does that sound about right?
No. But
Nahari Crawford had a brief NFL career. Nahari Crawford, I think, made a tryout.
But basically, it was you have the senior that's leaving who had a good season, and then there was a younger receiver that was kind of the number two, and it kind of went on like that for a few years during my time at school. And it seems like we don't really have a contributor that has eligibility on this team based off of. Lemire Byrd is a junior, and it seems like he kind of. I think I remember hearing his name a few times this season, but he's a smaller receiver, so I don't think he's wide receiver one by any means. I don't know. This is the first year that I remember the top two receivers both graduating at the same time.
Right. Yeah. So big holes to fill. I will say, that these Isabella, Irby, they didn't jump off the page at you in terms of their physicality, in terms of just sheer size or not. And they seem to always be open, always making catches, and scoring a lot. Sometimes it's you don't know who it is that's going to come out and be that kind of player for you. Real quick, looking at the receiving stats, Teddy Aful, he's sort of like the third head on that. He's a senior as well. So Teddy Aful, I'm checking his eligibility. I'm looking at his stats, and he played before Duquesne. He played 2 seasons at Stony Brook, 21 and 22. So he might be done with his 4 years as well. So that now you're looking at the top 3 receivers going out. So maybe that's the biggest question mark, things that Jerry Schmidt and Anthony Doria, the OC, and those boys are going to have to figure out heading into next season. So we'll see how the spring looks. We like to close every All Duke Sports Talk show with mentioning one of the Olympic or non-revenue sports teams. We've highlighted men's soccer and bowling so far. And here in episode 3, we want to talk about women's soccer, which of course also wrapped recently up its 2024 season. The women finished 9-7-1, including a 3-6-1 mark in the conference that left them out of the Atlantic 10 championships. 9-7-1 is respectable, but for the women's soccer team, they've been through a little bit of upheaval. They finished the season without their normal head coach, who was on a personal leave of absence. So there's some question marks into the future for women's soccer. So it remains to be seen where they're going to go from here. They've sort of been operating on a downturn, I think it's fair to say, since they won the Atlantic 10, surprisingly, in 2015. The women's soccer team made their way through the Atlantic 10 championship that year. So again, surprisingly, they advanced in the first round on penalty kicks, and then won in the semis 2-1, and the finals 2-0. They had a backup goalie come out of nowhere, Vanessa Perdomo. One of my former students who's off as a sportscaster right now, killing it. She's doing great. She works for Bloomberg Media. Vanessa was surprisingly like the starter in the playoffs, and they had this magical run, and they went to the NCAA championship and as the A10 champ that year. But ever since 2015, they have not really been a threat in the A10, and now they have this situation with the head coach, sort of trending opposite to how the men's soccer team is trending. Didn't know if you guys had any thoughts about soccer. The men's soccer team seems to draw more interest at the campus. Some of that might be winning, some of that might just be marketing, or the fact that there's a pro men's team in town and there's connections there. Keith Dambrot's son had played for the Riverhounds for a little bit, so some Riverhounds players were coming to the game, which was drawing fans there. Nick, do you recall as a student, being interested in soccer and being on Rooney Field as one of the Rooney Rowdies? Was that a fun thing to do on campus?
I did watch some soccer games. I wasn't there for every one, but I was also a former soccer player, so I think that was kind of helped at least keep me interested.
Really?
Yeah, I don't look like it now.
What did you play?
I anywhere that wasn't defense. I played center mid, outside mid, striker. Back when I was really young, I played goalie before height became an issue, and then they didn't want a small goalie in there anymore. But whenever soccer was there, there wasn't as much interest when I was in school. But I remember specifically all the athletics programs going to support each other a few years ago. That seemed to be a really big point with the basketball teams consistently showing up to the soccer games as well. And that was about 4 or 5 years ago, I want to say that started. And that was when the men's team started to find that success. So I do think that played a role in why they have a more continual support, is because people made efforts to go to those games, and then they kept winning. So that brought that interest up. From the women's perspective, I remember them having hot starts, specifically in non-conference play, and having a few shock upsets over the past few years. But whenever conference play started, it seemed like either injuries or something always popped up, and the A10 women's division might also be tougher. I don't know. I don't really know all that well, but the consistency hasn't been there as much, and I think the expectations haven't been there as much. Like you said, the 2015 NCAA tournament appearance after when the A10 was kind of a shock to everybody that season as well. So I think that might be playing a role. From the guys' side, it seems like they've underperformed based off of expectations the past 2 seasons, where they were performing really well, and then just kind of once it got into postseason play of the A10 tournament is when they had a shock upset here and there. From the women's side, it seems like they struggle through A10 play and then kind of fizzle out.
So the Duquesne women's soccer team did have back-to-back 11-win seasons following the A10 title, in 2016 and 17. But this season marked their first winning season since 2017. So it has been a downturn, but maybe things are kicking back up. Again, Al Alvine didn't finish the season as head coach, which was interesting. He's on a family leave. We wish Coach Alvine and his family the best. It was assistant coach Dave Gray who led the program toward the end, but their attempt to make the playoffs.
Wasn't he from Fort Myers, Florida?
Which guy, Alvine?
Yeah.
Dave Gray is local
That's
guy, if I'm not mistaken. Dave Gray's from Crafton.
okay.
Alvine
I thought, huh?
is I'm checking on Al's background. He was a Robert Morris grad. He's hometown's Butler, New Jersey.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought I'm getting something. Maybe it's the men's coach.
Brooks.
The reason I'm bringing it up because I spent 25 years in Fort Myers, Florida, where
Oh,
I thought that coach was from. Anyway,
talking about I'm sorry, I'm still thinking about Alvine. Why am I Chase Brooks? Is that who you're thinking of?
I don't know, but I remember reading I have to mention that call up the guy. How does a guy from Fort Myers, Florida, which I was 24 years down there,
He is. Yeah, Chase
wind up
Brooks
at
is from Fort
Duquesne?
Myers. He is from Fort Myers, Florida. He is. I
Right.
wasn't aware of that background. But guys, here's
He
a
definitely,
quick topic on soccer. Sorry, Nick, you were gonna say?
I was gonna say you definitely can't tell that from his recruiting. It's all international kids that usually it's a mix of international and local kids. There's not really any Florida talent coming up to the men's soccer team.
Good point. Now, here's a conversation the NCAA has been having regarding soccer, is possibly moving it to a spring championship, and that would mean that the season might be varsity both fall and spring, whereas right now it's just varsity in the fall and the spring is sort of like a scrimmage season. Okay, if you will, the games don't count toward the team's records. But the idea here would be almost like how tennis and rowing and golf. And a few other sports have a fall season, okay, where the games count towards your record, but they don't compete in the championship till the spring. So there's a couple months off there. That's one possibility to have a fall regular season or part of the regular season, a lot of non-conference games, and then focus in the spring with a conference schedule and of course your conference and then national championships, or just make the entire fall like the spring is now, where it's sort of practicey, and just make this a spring championship. And that's been a conversation for a while. It has not yet come to fruition. It's to make soccer a spring sport. The way I think that actually might help Duquesne is kind of light in terms of spring sports. Right now it's tough. I do a lot of work with the athletics department and they get stretched pretty thin. If guys like Paul Hightower and the sports info guys, Jim Duzick and his crew, they get stretched really thin, the marketing team, when it comes to volleyball and football and men's soccer and women's soccer, not to mention the tennises of the world. The swimming's bleeding into the fall schedule. Basketball bleeds into the fall schedule. The crossover season makes it really hard, to run two soccer programs, especially using the same pitch that football is using, right, during that fall semester. I think moving it to the spring where Duquesne only has lacrosse, and now you have 3 teams on that pitch, but, moving it to the spring where Duquesne doesn't have as much happening as they do in the fall, maybe that benefits Duquesne, but it does create like that logistical nightmare with having to share a field. So that'd be interesting. I don't quite know how they would handle such a move, but it hasn't yet come to fruition. Any huge thoughts on that, Rudy or Nick?
I mean, from a national perspective, it makes sense. It's a lot easier to get viewers when the competition in collegiate sports is baseball and softball, as opposed to football and basketball and volleyball and all the other big ticket sports. So from a gaining interest perspective, I do think it helps soccer as a whole, having it in the spring where there's less competing eyes, I guess. From a Duquesne specific standpoint, I think it might be better off because fans are more likely to, especially as the season goes later on, when the weather's starting to get warmer and they're looking for an excuse to be outside, that might actually help with students going and watching the games more consistently. I know they do have pretty good viewership for the guys, even with the fall schedule being what it is. But I mean, if the weather's nicer and it's not a chilly October day when the game's on, I can't imagine that hurting student attendance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you're playing in April and May, maybe that's better than having to play in November. So the championships are held in better weather. Well, Rudy, have you been paying attention to the message boards? Is there any burning topics on there that
Well,
you'd like us
I
to
see.
address? Or
I see in recruiting and on basketball, they're talking about Bryce James.
Hmm.
Who knows? What do you think?
Well,
Uh,
I would like to have seen Bronny James play a little bit more in college before he tried to make the leap to the NBA, and I think
Right.
he's in a good spot. So maybe Bryce, Nick.
Yeah, I saw somebody on X or Twitter post something about how Bryce's 3-star ranking might be fraudulent because his only 2 offers are us and Ohio State, uh, which are both very connected to LeBron and his family.
Right.
But I, I mean, even if that is the case, and he doesn't play much when he gets here, it still wouldn't hurt our university having him come off the bench and develop here.
Right.
I mean, he's I think 6'3", 6'4". So he wouldn't be a big. I think people are thinking that he was gonna
Bryce
keep
Bryce
growing.
is like 6'8", isn't he?
I
Bryce?
think I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he only ended up being like 6'4". His brother's only 6'1". So people and Bryce, I
Oh,
think, was 6'4" at a younger age, so they thought he was going to keep growing and then kind of stopped. So I was hoping that he'd be a big, and then we'd be able to develop him here. If he did kind of have this sort of recruiting stance where not any other teams are offering him, um, as a 2 guard, I still think it would be worth it to get him over here. If for nothing else, then to have the James family kind of always connected to Duquesne moving forward. But hey,
Yeah, there's nothing negative about it, right? I mean, it's not like he's going to be taking someone's spot on the floor necessarily, and if he does, you know, I
he
mean,
earns it at that
he
point,
earns
you
it.
think.
Yeah, I mean, so keeping it all in the family, that was a part of the reason why Drew Joyce, I would think, is also here because he was part of the Dambrot sort of James family connection. Um,
Right.
having LeBron James family play basketball at Duquesne can't do anything but be positive, I think. Right? If he's on the court helping us win, that's great, and if he's just on the roster helping us win, in other ways with fundraising and attention, that's fine as well. So I can't see any drawback to that whatsoever. I'd welcome it with open arms. I think it would have behooved Bronny to also go down the same route because I think he needed some seasoning in college. In the A10, I think would have been a good conference for him to get that. But as it stands, the Griffies of the NBA, which is super cool, and I get that. And I wish Bronny the absolute best. Just it wasn't meant to be, I suppose. Well, guys, that pretty much winds up All Duke Sports Talk episode 3. So when we talk next Sunday, we record this on Sunday evenings and we try to get it out within 24 to 48 hours. We'll have a whole host of other topics to talk to you about. Hopefully a few more Duquesne basketball wins. Please do get down to the Coop on Tuesday if this episode drops in time. And make yourself heard there because it helps. The energy matters. The 6-man matters. And if you can't make that game, get to another one. So without further ado, shoo shoo rah rah, we're out of here. Any final words, Rudy or Nick?
No, just let's go Dukes.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
Time.
Let's go Dukes.